record. That little thing means it's recording. All right. All right. Thank you for having me at these clinical rounds. So my client, her name is Mia. She is 25 years old, she, her pronouns. She is from Italian descent and is a first-generation Canadian. There is no official diagnosis, but she suspects having anxiety or depression, which is kind of why she sought out some therapy. She is currently a theater student doing her bachelor's degree at Concordia University. She is single and lives alone currently, and she was referred by a friend to try out drama therapy, but has no previous experience with therapy thus far. So the assessments I used were Ncube's Tree of Life. Ncube is a psychologist and narrative therapist who has worked with vulnerable children in South Africa. I also used the Hog's Eco-Anxiety Scale, adapted with object projection, embodied scale, and spectrogram. So if you know the Hog's Eco-Anxiety Scale, you know Tegan L. Hogg, who is an environmental psychologist. The object projection and embodiment stems from some of the core processes in literature from Phil Jones, who was a drama therapist and a professor at UCL. And the spectrogram was coined by J.L. Moreno, who has founded psychodrama and group psychotherapy. And the third assessment I have used is Mouli Lahad's 6-part story. Mouli Lahad is a psychotherapist and psychotrauma specialist. So the Tree of Life is used to kind of go over family, ancestry, history, current life situations, views of the self, namely the characteristics, hopes and dreams, social supports, or important people in their life, legacies passed down or accomplishments, and current life challenges. The Hogg Eco-Anxiety Scale, as you know, is used to see how often a client is preoccupied with climate change and other global environmental problems. But the use of object projection, embodied scale, and spectrogram was used to reach tacit knowledge, to dig deeper, put images and symbols to feelings that they're experiencing, and maybe put symbols and images to feelings that are maybe not as easily expressed verbally. And then Mouli Lahad's 6-part story was used to view coping styles, themes, resources, challenges, subconscious connections to the here and now, and the use of symbolism, of course, for, again, feelings, emotions that may be difficult to express verbally again. So I have some images of the scale, the Hog's Eco-Anxiety Scale, where one end of the room was nearly every day, and there's a few objects used in this category. The next one was several of the days. Again, there was quite a few objects in this one. And then over half the day, again, a few more objects, and this was spanning the length of the room. And then the last image here was kind of in the middle of several of the days and over half of the days. There was no objects placed in none of the days. And this is an image of the Tree of Life that we did. Again, there was some symbolism with the squirrel and the red blob, and to add on to some of the feelings that were maybe not as easy to express. And then we went and through the entire tree, looking at every aspect. I don't have a picture to show for the 6-part story. We did it online and I didn't have access to it, but I will talk about it a little bit later and the findings that were in it. So the presenting problems presents with symptoms of eco-anxiety. So there seems to be a lot of fear for the state of the world and a lot of guilt for not doing enough to help mitigate some of the climate enjeux. There was expressed heavy sadness that was expressed through multiple of the assessments, kind of coupled with the feeling of being too small and the actions not being enough. Although there was support systems in place, Mia felt that she couldn't fully share her worries with others, as others didn't quite understand what was happening or couldn't relate to it. There was a deep sense of hopelessness that was expressed, again, through multiple of the assessments, and also mentioning of sleeping a lot, being chronically tired, and then an overall feeling of not being safe in the world. And again, these were identified throughout the 3 assessments. So my working hypothesis is, one, moving from a farm town, small town, to a big city to pursue her studies was a big change. And from literature from Dennec and Mackenzie et al., who both mentioned an increase in anxiety and uneasiness when moving to more urban areas, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic. Mia has a very deep love for nature and animals, and Kessler and Shelley also mention that a deep connection with nature would in turn create more eco-anxiety and awareness of the world state. And then finally, since being in the city, there has been more witness to death and mistreatment of animals, whether it's strays or wildlife. So Pinkala has also mentioned or talked about how grieving and the earth, the animals, is also linked with eco-anxiety and feelings of hopelessness and overall uneasiness and unsafety in the world. So for the emerging themes in multiple of the assessments, the feeling of a crushing feeling was often stated by the client, as well as the theme of death. So this was death of the world, death of animals, death of humanity. At certain points, there was also expression of being uncertain if they would even be alive tomorrow, given the world state. Another theme that did come up quite a few times was kind of the confusion around community, one with the people close to them and not feeling that they quite understand them, but also community, like the activist community for climate change, and kind of not feeling totally a part of that, not having the energy to be an activist and doing more, and feeling, again, not doing enough in comparison to maybe other people in that community. And that kind of goes into the next theme of is moving forward selfish, was seemingly a question that appeared often, kind of again linked to not doing enough or only being able to do so much, and then wondering if taking care of the self is selfish. So this was identified using the Hog's eco-anxiety scale, but it came forth when using the objects to kind of expand a little bit more on each question on the scale. And then again, as I mentioned, with the confusion in community, the close ones that are in her support system are not quite understanding her experience. So for the level of insight, the client is psychologically minded, very aware of the self and the stress that she's living in her everyday life. She does have the capacity to notice the good qualities as identified in the Tree of Life, but it appears that some of the characteristics and qualities are more in service of others, and we'll see that a little bit in the next slide. She does know what she needs. So the safety, reassurance, and community were kind of named, again, throughout the assessments. But there also appears to be maybe a feeling of is that really possible? Is what it seemed to, it's knowing what she needs, but appearing to not really know how to get it or see that. And it kind of links in with the hopelessness kind of mentioned. She did mention that school and theater has helped her to understand what she is feeling, and that also kind of led to seeking out therapy in the first place. Was that through theater, there was a more expansion on her emotional state. She names that acting is a skill for her, and being a good friend and being loyal is also one of her high qualities. And then going into the strengths, identified in the Tree of Life were loyal, thoughtful, and generous. Again, good at acting. More strengths will be determined throughout more assessments and interventions, but these were a few that were already named by the client. So for the support systems, very close with her mother and grandmother, but again, they don't quite understand the anxiety around climate change and global environmental factors. There's seems to be quite a few friends that she is close with, but again, those friends aren't necessarily understanding of her experience, and in fact, she perceives them as perpetuating the detriments of the world. So, for example, her friend heavily uses AI, which, as we know, uses a lot of water resources and is not good for the environment. And even though she has expressed that to her friend, it wasn't really received as the client perceives, and kind of worries about the level of which she can confide in this friend, but in other areas is a very supportive friend. Another support system was her theater teacher, who seems to have been very supportive throughout this kind of like awakening and understanding that there is something going on. Names that this theater teacher was also, very receptive and in listening and supporting throughout the studies as well. So the unconscious conflicts showed up in the 6-part story. So the name of the story is Puff Really Cares. And so the client did mention quite often about the pressure of having to save the world and kind of holding that on their shoulder, again, with the crushing feeling, that weight, that heaviness. Within the story, there were 2 specific characters, the cloud that protects the sun and the sun that encourages him to reign. And so this brought in the idea of community and how each person has a role, that the earth cannot survive without one another, that both the sun and the cloud can help each other to make the earth grow. And then the client even named that there is a lot of ways to care, and there's more than one way to care. So throughout kind of exploring this story that she created, the client did not see the connection to her life at first. Through like further probing and prompts and questions to clarify, to explore further and expand on what the story means, if there's any messages or themes, the client did notice a connection, but appeared apprehensive of it. So understanding that this is a possibility, but seemingly not being able to imagine that possibility for themselves. My countertransference appeared, I deeply connect with the feeling of moving from a small farm town to a big city and the anxieties around that. And then I had also a countertrans feeling of wanting to explain the connections that were made in the 6-part story, which kind of leads on to the potential challenges. The client did appear to, like I said, kind of be apprehensive about some of the connections that may have been noticed, but not fully grasping. So my question, again, in line with that, So when a client asks for your opinion on the matter, how would you proceed with that? How can we help guide the client to make their own connections and insight from the exercise without imposing my own interpretations? And is it valid to let the client sit with the information and not draw any connections from them in the moment? I'll leave it up.
Okay.
And that's that.
Thank you. I'm wondering what is your impulse or instinct with that first one? When a client asks for your opinion on the matter, how do you proceed?
Yes, so there was some questions being asked about like, what do I do? Like, or what do you think the story means?
Okay.
So that's kind of like where I was being asked, so that feeling of wanting to explain was kind of stemming from that.
Okay.
But I had some reservations, wasn't sure how exactly to proceed when being asked directly.
Yeah. Okay, that helps clarify, because I was wondering if that was about something in general or for one of the interventions or assessments. Because I think that the answer might change. Like if they're just asking a general question, then you might like just run a quick check through your brain. Is my genuine answer going to be like clinically not recommended? And if it's a non-issue, then you can just answer it truthfully. But that's a big question about like your opinion on what they've made, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you felt yourself kind of going to the same impulses as the client, where you're making those connections. Okay.
Yeah.
Can you swing it back to the client when they're asking for your opinion? If they really need your opinion, is it the case that they really need your opinion, or are they searching for like attention and praise? Could be possible. These are really good questions. I'm having to get my mind around them.
We can focus on one too, if there's one that may be easier to answer.
Yeah. I'm curious, and this isn't in your challenges, but I'm curious about the 3 assessments you did. How did you come to choose those 3?
Well, I chose the Tree of Life because I think it's a good overview of kind of the client's history, past, present, and future. It also was, I think, a great starting point, and also the aspect of the tree kind of relates to eco-anxiety, and with some of the things within the intake kind of prompted me to lean towards that. And then Hog's eco-anxiety scale is a given for this, but adding the embodiment, the object projection, making it larger than rather just on paper or talk. From my experience as a drama therapist, but also from the literature pointing to helping kind of dig deeper in grabbing or aiding in expressing certain feelings, experiences, and then also just a realization that asking all these questions could bring up a lot of anxiety in the moment. There's quite a few questions, So kind of giving time in between to choose an object, to not rush through it, and really leave room for to talk more about it, to go further. And that's time. Yeah. Oh, and I'll just quickly go with the 6-part story. I think coping styles is important to kind of go over, see what is already in place or what could be put in place. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you. How do I stop the recording?